Hello, everybody. I hope you all have been doing well. And I just want to encourage my fellow brothers and sisters in Christ. And I especially want to encourage those whose peace have been robbed from them because of worry. You may be worrying about many different things or one thing in particular, but you're so concerned that this what if might happen. It seems so real, and it even seems likely to some. And if there's a mist of doubt and you don't know what's going to happen, some of our default is to panic, is to be anxious. And it takes away our peace, even our sleep at times. And I want to encourage you by reminding you that even though you may lose many things in this life, as God gives and takes away, He will never take away Jesus. As children of God, we have to remember that Jesus is here to stay. He will provide, He will take care of us, and we have no reason to fear. Even though you might be afraid of all the what ifs, I want you to know you're safe right now. Nothing has to happen in order for you to feel safe. You are safe at this time because Jesus is with you and He will never leave you. Psalm chapter 37, verse 25, King David said, I have been young and now am old, yet I have not seen the righteous forsaken or his children begging for food. Jesus always meets our needs. God is our provider. And as we follow Him, He provides for us, not just physically, but for our soul, our mind, and spiritually. And I think a lot of us in this day and age, we feel like we need a certain standard of living. We need certain things to keep up with others or how someone will view us in order for us to survive. And obviously that's not true. We can be happy with a lot less, but we feel so threatened and afraid if we lose certain things like a standard of living, we could start panicking, fear of what others may think of us. And we have to remember what God says, what it takes for us to be joyful and at peace, just having everything we need. In 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 8 through 10 says, But if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evils. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs. And so what does it take for us to be content, to be joyful in the Lord, to have peace in the Lord, and have hope in the Lord? Food and clothing. If you have that, it is enough reason for us to be content. Yet especially many of us in America and many other countries, we feel like we need way more than that to be content. And that's simply not true because God said food and clothing is enough. And not only that, many of us fall for this trick of thinking if we had enough money, a certain amount, if we were rich, if God would just give us all this wealth or whatever we think we need, we'll be content then. But the scriptures tell us clearly that you could fall into temptation if you're to become rich. Because it says, but those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare. So it's not a sin being rich, but if you have it in your heart and desire to be rich more than anything in life, even just walking with God, even over Jesus, you could fall into great temptation and hurt yourself. You could plunge yourself into ruin and destruction. Those are the words that the scriptures say, and those people have pierced themselves with many pangs. And so why would you want to desire to be rich? If your desire is stronger for riches than God, you need to repent and turn away from this certain road of destruction, of pain. It's not good for you. The world makes it look like it's good, but then if you desire that way and have your heart set on riches, it's not going to end well. And so what I'm saying is you should be content with food and clothing. And many of us, God has given us more than that, like, good shelter. There's even air conditioning, clean water, plumbing, electricity. We have so much, and yet we still fear for tomorrow because our certain standard of living might go down. So I just want to remind you, don't worry. Jesus will take care of your needs and your desires as you delight in Him. I got news recently that my grandmother is pretty sick, and she's in her 90s, and she lived a life trusting in Jesus. And my two grandfathers have passed about 2 years ago, the same year, and they also passed in their 90s, and they trusted in the Lord. One of my grandfathers actually was a pastor too, who worked as a pastor for many years. And when I think about them, it doesn't feel like that long when I saw them like strong and healthy. I'm 40 now. And I remember when I was like maybe 7 or 8, just playing around, and my grandmother looked at me and said, "You have a long life to live." But it doesn't seem to be that true. As I'm 40 now and looking at my grandfather's already gone and my grandmother gone, time is short. And what I realize is that when we worry about these little things, and they seem big right now, but when you're 90, if you get there, they're not going to be big anymore. You're going to have a better sight of the past and how God worked in your life. But if you constantly worry about these things in your life, what if this happens? What if that happens? I need to protect myself. I hope this doesn't happen. God, please protect me. He is protecting you. But when you keep worrying, it becomes a distraction in your life so that you cannot carry out the good works that God has planned for you. And when you keep on worrying and protecting yourself and just looking out for yourself and your family, and you get to this old age, I think you'll realize that the ladder you've been climbing was leaning up against the wrong wall. In other words, your work may have been in vain when all you focus on is yourself and your family and trying to survive and worrying about so many things. Because my grandfathers, who are in heaven, I believe, they probably realized they had nothing to worry about. Not even once. There was no single situation in their life where there was a just reason to worry, because Jesus was with them. And my grandmother now, I'd imagine she could look back and say, I didn't need to worry about a thing as well. I hope she could see that right now as well, because she could see that the Lord has met all her needs. My grandparents came from Korea, and it was before, or they left the country as the North and South were being split, and they faced some challenging times, food shortages. They're running, from the war. They had to deal with gangsters at times. They were being chased by enemy soldiers, and they had to survive in a new country, yet the Lord met all their needs. They lived long and fruitful lives. Well, I assume they're fruitful. I didn't know them that well, but I knew them well enough where I knew they trusted in the Lord. But what I'm saying is, God met all their needs, even though they went through such challenging times in their lives. And now it's over. And I'd imagine they would say, I had nothing to worry about. And maybe they would say, I wish I would have just trusted in the Lord and focused on doing his work more. Because now that they're in heaven, and my grandmother, she'll be facing the Lord, one of these days, coming sooner than most people, I'd imagine. And she could see the faithfulness of God up to this point. And so what I'm saying here is, we don't have to wait till we're in our 80s or 90s to realize that God is faithful, to realize that we don't have a single thing to worry about. Because as we leave this earth, we're going to take nothing with us but Jesus. Jesus is here with us, and when we die, he'll leave with us. We don't have to worry about meeting all our needs and being concerned and panicking over the things that we feel like we need in this life. And so when you find yourself worrying about something, and it could be big, maybe you could lose a lot, but it's kind of like a sheep worrying about one particular thing. Like maybe the sheep is scared that a wolf will come and hurt, him or his family. And that is nonsense when you have a good shepherd who's aware not only of the wolves, but the good shepherd is aware of all the other dangers for this sheep, like bird of prey, maybe other predators like bears. There's sickness, there's snakes, there's injuries that could happen, and there's food that the sheep needs, and the water and the shelter. Yet the shepherd knows all their needs and meets their needs, protects them from all their worries. So if the sheep were to be consistent with his worrying, he should worry about all of that, not just the wolf. And so if you're to be consistent with your worrying, you shouldn't just be worrying about that particular thing you're concerned about, but so many different things, like even asteroids hitting us, or maybe an earthquake happening, or a sickness coming. There's just so many things that we cannot defend ourselves from, that it makes no sense to worry, because our good shepherd is taking care of us. We have to realize that we have a shepherd that is way beyond any human shepherd. He knows all the things that could harm us, and he has us covered. He leads us to good pastures, to still waters. He calms our souls. John chapter 10 verse 14 says, I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. We are intimately close with Jesus. He is our shepherd. He knows us. He knows what we need and desire, and he's a good shepherd. And so worrying really makes no sense as we belong to Jesus. We don't have to worry about anything. It's our choice to do that, and it only hurts us, and there's no need, because Jesus has us covered. And so there's no point in you worrying, because we have a good shepherd. And when we are finished with this life, we will leave with Jesus, the only person we need, the only person we desire, really. So don't worry. Jesus will always be with you and take care of you. God bless you.